We're inside the Johnson Space Center in the historic Mission Operations Control Room 2. This is where the Apollo 11 moon landing mission was controlled. Behind me here, you can see all of these consoles where the different flight controllers and the flight director, Gene Kranz, and others were actually sitting and monitoring all of the operations taking place during that historic first mission to the moon. Of course, there had been other missions to the moon to circle to prepare for the moon landing, but Apollo 11 on July 20th, 1969 was the very first time humans had set foot on another celestial body. So a really exciting moment, not only for Americans, but people all around the world. And this control room hasn't been used since the early 90s. It was actually used during the Gemini program, during the Apollo program, and then the space shuttle. Some of the early space shuttle missions were also controlled right here from this room. But this was the room that was used on the historic Apollo 11 moon mission, featuring Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. And they've just reopened this to the public. And you can see here behind me, they have these projection screens where they were not only monitoring video. Here they have, you can see the still image of what looks to be Neil Armstrong going down the ladder of the lunar module, but they'd be able to monitor all kinds of system readouts and whatnot. But they've actually just reopened this to the public at the beginning of this month. Underwent close to $5 million renovation. A big part of that money came from the city of Webster, which is here where the Johnson Space Center is located. So I want to turn this around and kind of walk you around the room a bit. So you can see here these different consoles have actually been restored. This whole room is made to look historically accurate to the period of the 1960s during those Apollo moon missions that started in 1969 all the way through the last mission to the moon, Apollo 17 in 1972. These were actually removed from this room and sent off to Kansas for restoration. And they actually studied historic photos. They studied film to really find out what this room looked like. And they consulted with many of the men and women who actually worked in this room during that era to make sure that everything was historically accurate to a T. Now, this doesn't have to do with Apollo 11, but Apollo 13, many of you remember the movie, of course, but that was the successful failure, as it was called. This was actually the mirror that was flown on Aquarius, the lunar module, to the moon back in April of 1970, and the crew brought it back kind of as a tribute to all of the men and women who helped get them home safely. So there's a lot of history in this room. And you can actually now visit this on tours at Space Center Houston. You can take the tram tour here and go inside the viewing room that you can see very far off in the distance at the back of the room, and you'll be able to really get up close with history. So we have an entire day of events planned here at Space Center Houston, at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Apollo moon mission, the very first one, again, to set foot on the moon. And we'll have live reports not only here on East Texas Now, but coming up today on the East Texas News at 4, 5, 6, and 10 o'clock, and then tomorrow on GMET Weekend at 8 a.m. So you want to stay tuned here for all of our coverage of this really exciting moment in history for even those who were not alive at the time, like myself, just have been inspired by this achievement in human history. Jeremy, back to you.